The night was quiet except for the crackling of a small fire. The human man sat alone, his cloak wrapped around his shoulders, staring into the flames. The ruins around him whispered of a city that once lived, but now lay broken and forgotten. He was used to silence, but tonight something felt different. It was as if the darkness itself was watching him, waiting for him to move. He took a bite of the dry ration in his hand, chewing slowly. His eyes kept shifting to the shadows above the fire, to the broken beams that leaned across the ruined walls. Something was there. He could feel it. At first, he thought it was just the wind, the way it made old wood creak and stone shift. But then he saw it, a small figure clinging to the beam just above the firelight. Her ears were the first thing he noticed, long, soft, and trembling in the light. They twitched with every crackle of the fire, as if each spark of flame was a threat. The rest of her body was thin, fragile, covered in torn cloth that looked more like rags. She was curled up tightly, as though she had been hiding there for a long time. Her eyes, large and glowing faintly, watched him with both fear and hunger. The man froze, his hand hovering near the knife on his belt. He had heard stories of these abandoned ones. No one wanted them, not even their own kind. They were left to die in the ruins, unwanted and untouchable. The patrols said anyone helping them was a traitor. But now one of them was right above his fire, trembling like a trapped bird. For a long moment, neither moved. The fire cracked, sending sparks into the air, and her ears twitched again. She pressed herself lower against the beam, but her eyes never left him. He could see the struggle inside her, fear fighting with the desperate need for warmth. Her body was too thin, her movements weak. She had not eaten properly in days, maybe weeks. He shifted slightly, slowly lowering his hand from the knife. If she meant to harm him, she would have done it already. But the way she trembled told him everything. She was more afraid of him than he was of her. Still, the man felt the weight of choice on his shoulders. If he ignored her, she might die by morning. If he helped her, he might be marked as a criminal. The silence pressed down, heavy and thick. Finally, he spoke, his voice low and steady. "I see you," he said, not unkindly. Her ears twitched at the sound of his voice, her body curling tighter as if ready to vanish into the dark. But she did not run. Her glowing eyes blinked once, slow and uncertain. He reached into his pack and pulled out a piece of dried bread. He held it up, letting her see, then placed it gently on the stone beside the fire. "Come down if you want it," he murmured. The girl did not move, but her eyes locked on the food. Hunger burned there, stronger than her fear. She shifted slightly, her fragile fingers tightening around the beam. The fire popped loudly, and she flinched so hard that her ears flattened against her head. He felt something stir in his chest, a feeling he had not known for a long time. Pity, and anger at the cruelty of the world. Why should a child be left like this, trembling in the dark, unwanted by all? He clenched his jaw, realizing that the decision had already been made in his heart. "You'll freeze up there," he whispered, his voice softer this time. "Down here, you'll be warm." Her eyes flickered between him and the bread, torn between fear and hope. Finally, she inched forward, her body shaking, her movements clumsy. She climbed slowly, painfully, like every muscle was screaming with weakness. Halfway down, her grip slipped, and she let out a tiny gasp. Without thinking, the man rose and stepped forward. He held out his arms as she dropped. She was so light when she fell against him, as if her body was made of nothing but bones and rags. Her ears brushed his chin, trembling violently. He knelt slowly, lowering her to the ground near the fire. Her eyes were wide, frightened but not resisting. The bread lay on the stone, and she reached for it with shaking hands. She ate fast, too fast, as if she feared it would vanish before she finished. He watched in silence, his heart twisting with every bite she took. When she was done, she curled near the fire, her ears still trembling but her breathing calmer. Her eyes closed halfway, though she kept glancing at him. Trust and fear battled inside her gaze, but exhaustion won. The man sat back, staring into the flames. He knew what he had just done. He had crossed a line. From this night forward, nothing would be the same. The girl with the trembling ears was no longer just a shadow in the ruins. She was his responsibility now, whether he wanted it or not. The firelight flickered across her fragile face, and he could not look away. He had risked everything by reaching out, and yet, strangely, he felt no regret. Only the weight of a promise he had not spoken, but could never take back. And in the silence of the night, her soft ears trembled, but no longer alone. The fire burned low, throwing soft light across the broken walls. The human man sat awake, his hand resting on his knee, watching the small alien girl as she lay curled close to the warmth. Her soft ears twitched now and then, but no longer with wild fear, more with the instinct of a creature that had lived too long in shadows. Her eyes blinked slowly, fighting sleep, as if afraid that if she closed them, the world would swallow her. He could see it clearly. She did not trust safety, because safety had never been hers. The man leaned forward slightly, his voice steady but gentle. "You are safe," he whispered, though he wasn't sure if she understood his words. Her glowing eyes flickered toward him, full of doubt, full of silence. She said nothing, not a single sound, but her gaze spoke louder than words. It was a silent plea, desperate, fragile, and it settled deep into his chest. He wondered when she had last spoken to anyone. Maybe no one had listened to her for years. Maybe her voice had withered, like her small starving body. Her soft ears lowered, folding against her thin neck as though hiding her feelings. Yet her eyes remained locked on him, asking something she could not say. He picked up the small flask of water from his pack and set it near her hand. "Drink," he said quietly, pushing it closer. Her hands, trembling but eager, reached out. She lifted the flask to her lips, spilling half the water as she drank too fast. But he did not stop her, because thirst was stronger than manners. When she finished, she held the flask with both hands, clutching it tightly as if afraid he would take it away. She looked at him again, her lips parting slightly, but no words came. The man felt a shiver run through him. She wanted to speak, he could feel it, but something inside her held her back. Fear, trauma, or maybe the weight of too much silence. The fire crackled, and the wind whistled softly through the broken walls. He leaned closer, lowering his voice to a whisper. "You don't have to be afraid of me," he said. For the first time, her lips moved, shaping soundless words. Her throat worked, but no voice came. Still, he understood. She was trying to say thank you. The man felt his chest tighten. How could such a small, broken girl carry so much pain in her silence? She trembled, her ears twitching nervously, as though waiting for him to shout, to strike, to drive her away. But he did none of those things. Instead, he pulled another piece of bread from his pack and placed it in her hands. Her fingers closed around it as though it were treasure. She ate slowly this time, stealing glances at him after every bite. The firelight flickered across her thin face, showing scars he had not noticed before. Marks of neglect, of hunger, of being treated as nothing. His hand tightened into a fist, anger burning inside him at whoever had left her like this. But when she raised her eyes again, that anger melted. Her look was soft, almost fragile, and again it asked without words, "Will you keep me safe?" He leaned back, taking a slow breath. It was dangerous to even think about it. The patrols would come again soon, searching the ruins for strays like her. If they found her with him, he would be punished, maybe worse. He should send her away now, before she became his burden. But when he looked at her soft ears trembling in the glow, his heart refused. "Listen," he said quietly, "if you stay with me, it will not be easy. Her eyes widened slightly, catching every word. "I will protect you," he added. "But you must stay hidden, you must stay quiet." Her small hands gripped the blanket he had given her, pulling it closer around her body. Her ears flicked once, twice, then stilled. It was her answer, not spoken, but clear enough. The man let out a long breath. He had not planned for this, had not wanted responsibility. But fate had placed her above his fire, and now she was here, silent yet pleading. He could no longer pretend it was not his problem. He could no longer walk away. The night deepened, stars barely visible through cracks in the ruined roof. She lay close to the fire, her body slowly relaxing for the first time in what must have been years. Her eyes fluttered, then closed, though her hand still clutched the blanket like a shield. The man watched her in silence. The plea in her eyes burned into his mind. A vow took root in his heart, unspoken but unbreakable. He would not let her tremble alone again. And as the fire burned low, the ruined city seemed less cold. Because two forgotten souls now shared its silence. One human and one trembling alien girl, bound by nothing but the fragile thread of trust. And by a silent plea that would change both their lives forever. The fire had almost died when the man finally closed his eyes. He did not sleep deeply, for his mind stayed alert, listening for danger. Every creak of the ruined walls and every whisper of the wind kept him tense. And yet, beside him, the small alien girl slept with her ears twitching lightly, her body wrapped in the blanket he had given. It was the first peaceful sleep she had known in years, he could tell. When dawn crept over the horizon, painting the ruins in pale light, he rose slowly. He checked the edges of the street outside, making sure no patrols were nearby. The city was quiet, but quiet did not mean safe. He knew the patrols would search again soon, hunting for abandoned children like her. If they found her here, there would be no mercy. Not for her, and not for him. He returned to the fire and looked down at her. Her ears flicked once, sensing his shadow, and she woke with a start. Fear flashed in her glowing eyes until she saw it was him. Her body relaxed slightly, but her hands still clutched the blanket like armor. He sighed softly, realizing just how deep her fear ran. She trusted him only a little, enough to stay, but not enough to feel safe. The man crouched beside her, speaking low. "We cannot stay here," he said. Her ears twitched, her eyes following his lips, trying to understand. He pointed toward the broken wall where the city beyond stretched like a maze of stone. "Patrols will come," he explained. "If they find you with me, they will take you, and they will punish me." She lowered her head, her ears drooping sadly. For a moment, it seemed she wanted to crawl back to the shadows, to hide again. But then she looked at him. Her eyes carried the same silent plea from the night before. "Don't leave me," they said without sound. He felt it in his chest, heavy and unshakable. He rubbed his face with his hands, groaning softly. This was the risk, the one he had tried to avoid. She was no longer just a stranger in the dark. She was his responsibility. The man opened his pack and pulled out another piece of bread. He placed it in her hands, watching as she held it close but did not eat right away. Instead, she looked up at him, her ears trembling. Finally, she whispered, her voice barely more than a broken sound. "Why?" she asked. "Why help me?" The words cracked, rusty from years of silence, but they reached him like thunder. He stared at her, surprised she had spoken. Her voice was soft, fragile, yet filled with pain. He wanted to answer, but the truth caught in his throat. Why was he helping her? Because no one else would. Because leaving her to die felt like murder. Because when he saw her trembling ears, something inside him refused to turn away. He swallowed hard and finally said, "Because you deserve to live." Her eyes widened at his words, as if she had never heard such a thing before. Her lips parted, but no reply came. She simply lowered her head and held the bread tighter. A small tear slid down her cheek, catching the morning light. The man clenched his fists, feeling the weight of his choice grow heavier. Helping her was not simple kindness, it was rebellion. The law was clear. Her kind was to be abandoned, forgotten, erased. By reaching out to her, he had crossed a line that could not be undone. If the patrols caught them, he would be marked as a traitor, hunted, punished. His life, his freedom, even his future, all of it was now at risk. And yet, when he looked at her small trembling form, he knew he would not take back his choice. The morning stretched on, the sun rising higher. He packed his things quickly, motioning for her to follow. She stood slowly, her legs unsteady, but she stayed close. Every step she took, her ears twitched nervously at the sounds of the empty city. When a stone clattered in the distance, she flinched and pressed against his side. He placed a steady hand on her shoulder, guiding her through the ruins. Together, they moved like shadows, careful and silent. The man knew hiding her would be almost impossible, but sending her back into the darkness was something he could not do. So he made the choice that morning, standing in the ruins with the fire behind them. He would protect her, no matter the risk. If the patrols wanted her, they would have to go through him. The decision settled in his heart like a weight of iron, heavy but unbreakable. As they walked, the girl looked up at him again. Her lips moved silently, no words this time, just a faint shape. But he understood it, the same silent plea as before. Please, don't let me go. And he nodded once, firm and steady. You're safe with me, he whispered. And though fear still clung to her, her ears trembled less. The ruins swallowed their footsteps as they vanished deeper into the city. Two figures bound together by chance, by risk, and by a fragile thread of trust. The man knew danger was coming, knew the patrols would not stop hunting. But he also knew something else, something that gave him strength. He had made his choice. And for her, for the trembling girl with soft ears, he would risk everything. The ruins grew quieter as they moved farther from the center of the city. The man led the way through broken streets, his eyes always searching, his ears tuned for the sound of patrol boots. The alien girl followed close, her soft ears twitching at every echo, her small feet stumbling over cracked stone. When she tripped, he slowed his steps, letting her catch up. She never asked for help with words, but her body spoke for her, weak, tired, but unwilling to stop. At last, they reached the shell of an old building half buried in sand. The man stopped and checked the shadows before leading her inside. It was nothing more than fallen walls and a broken roof, but it gave shelter from the open sky. She stepped in slowly, her glowing eyes darting around as if expecting danger at every corner. Her soft ears folded low, and her thin arms hugged her chest. He could see she was shaking again, not from the cold, but from fear of being unwanted. The man placed his pack on the ground and pulled out another ration. This time, instead of setting it aside, he handed it directly to her. For a moment she froze, staring at his hand. Her trembling fingers reached out, touched the food, then pulled back quickly, as though she feared it was a trick. But when he gave a small nod, she finally took it and held it close. She ate slower this time, watching him with every bite. When she finished, she lowered the last crumbs into her lap. Her ears lifted slightly, no longer trembling. Then she whispered, her voice rough but soft. Why, she asked again, why do this for me? The man sat against the wall, folding his arms. He had no simple answer. He looked at her fragile face, the scars of neglect, the trembling softness of her ears, and finally said, because you are alive. Her eyes widened at his words. It was as if no one had ever told her that being alive was reason enough. Her lips parted, but she could not speak. Instead, a small sound came from her throat, half broken, half grateful. She pulled the blanket tighter around herself, curling near him like a child seeking warmth. Her ears brushed lightly against his arm when she leaned closer. The touch was soft, almost hesitant, but it made him pause. For the first time, she was not trembling in fear. She was trembling in trust. The man felt something stir inside him. It was not duty, not obligation, but something deeper. A bond forming in silence, stronger than words. He reached out slowly, careful not to startle her. His hand brushed her soft ear lightly. She flinched at first, then froze. Her wide eyes turned to him, shining in the dim light. For a moment he thought she would pull away, but instead, she leaned into the touch, letting him feel the delicate warmth of her skin. "You are safe," he whispered again. Her lips moved silently, forming the word she had tried to say before. "Thank you," she breathed, barely audible. It was weak, broken, but it was there. The sound struck him harder than any weapon could. It was proof that she was still holding on, still fighting to live. The hours passed, and the building grew colder. He built a small fire from scraps of wood, shielding it so the smoke would not rise high. The girl sat beside the flames, her ears catching the glow. She looked smaller, yet stronger, wrapped in the blanket he had given. She watched him quietly, her glowing eyes soft now, not sharp with fear. Every glance she gave him carried the same silent message. "I trust you, even if I should not." The man leaned back against the wall, letting the weight of the day settle. He knew the risk he carried, knew that helping her would bring trouble. But when he looked at her resting near the fire, he felt no regret. Instead, he felt something rare, peace. The ruins outside were full of silence, yet inside this broken shelter, there was warmth. Not just from the fire, but from the fragile bond between them. As night returned, she curled close again, her ears resting lightly against his arm. She closed her eyes slowly, whispering one last word. "Safe," she said, almost as if testing the meaning. He gave a small nod, even though she could not see it. "Yes," he whispered, "you are safe." And as the firelight flickered across the ruined walls, he realized the truth. For the first time in years, he was not alone. And neither was she. The night passed too quickly. When the first light of morning crept across the ruins, the man was already awake. The girl still slept, her soft ears resting gently against his arm, her breathing steady and quiet. For a moment he allowed himself to believe they were safe, hidden from the world. But safety never lasted long in a broken city like this. The sound came faintly at first, distant boots striking stone. The man stiffened, his hand reaching for his pack. The girl's ears twitched, and she stirred awake, sensing danger even before his words. Her eyes opened wide, glowing softly in the dim light. She whispered one word, broken and fearful. "Patrol." He nodded once, quick and firm. "Quiet," he whispered, pressing a finger to his lips. She clutched the blanket tightly around herself, her whole body trembling again. The man moved to the doorway and looked out. Down the broken street, figures in dark armor were spreading out, searching. Their voices carried harshly through the ruins, barking orders. They were hunting, and he knew who they were hunting for. His heart pounded as he grabbed her hand. "Come," he said, pulling her away from the fire. She stumbled after him, her small feet struggling to keep up. Together they slipped through a gap in the wall, into an alley filled with broken stone. The sound of boots grew louder, closer. The girl's ears twitched wildly, and she pressed closer to him. Her eyes begged the same silent words as before. "Don't leave me." They ran, weaving through narrow alleys and shattered homes. The man moved with the skill of one who had survived long in these ruins. But the girl's steps were clumsy, her body weak. Twice she nearly fell, and both times he caught her arm, pulling her forward. Behind them, a voice shouted, harsh, commanding, "Over there! Move!" The chase had begun. The man cursed under his breath and pulled the girl into a collapsed building. They pressed themselves against the wall, hiding in the shadows. Boots thundered past the entrance, soldiers scanning the alleys with sharp eyes. He held his breath, keeping the girl close. Her ears trembled against his chest, her small hands gripping his shirt with desperate strength. He felt her heartbeat racing like a drum. When the soldiers passed, he did not wait. He led her through the building and out the back, into another maze of ruins. The city seemed endless, but nowhere was safe. The patrol would not give up easily, not when they believed a stray alien was hiding here. The girl stumbled again, nearly collapsing. The man stopped, lifting her into his arms without a word. She gasped softly, surprised, but wrapped her arms around his neck. Her head rested against his shoulder, her soft ears brushing his cheek. Carrying her slowed him, but he did not care. He would not leave her behind. The soldiers' voices grew louder again, their boots striking closer. He ducked into a broken stairway, climbing quickly despite the weight in his arms. They reached the upper floor of a ruined house. From there he could see the patrol spreading out below, their armor glinting in the pale light. The girl buried her face against his chest, too afraid to look. He crouched low, waiting, watching. The soldiers moved like wolves, searching every corner. One wrong move and they would be trapped. He glanced down at the girl. Her body trembled, but her grip on him was tight. She was silent, but her eyes when she looked up at him carried the same plea. Don't let them take me. He tightened his hold on her, whispering, I won't. The soldiers moved on, their shouts echoing farther away. The man waited until the sound faded before moving again. He carried her down the back stair and into the shadow of an old transport tunnel. It was dark, damp, filled with broken wires and rusted metal. But it was shelter, a place to breathe. He set her down gently against the wall. Her ears drooped, her eyes heavy with fear and exhaustion. She whispered faintly, They will not stop. He knelt beside her, meeting her gaze. No, he said, his voice firm, they will not stop. He took a deep breath, his hand resting lightly on her shoulder. But neither will I. Her eyes widened, shining in the dim light. Tears slipped down her cheeks, silent but clear. She leaned forward suddenly, pressing her forehead against his chest. Her ears trembled, but this time it was not only fear. It was trust, fragile but real. The man wrapped his arms around her, holding her steady. He knew the chase was far from over. The patrol would return, and the city would never be safe for her. But as he held her in the darkness of the tunnel, he understood something. The bond they had built was no longer fragile. It was unbreakable. She was not just a stranger he had saved. She was his to protect, his to defend, no matter the risk. Outside, the boots of the patrol echoed again, distant but relentless. Inside, the man and the girl clung to each other, two against the world, hunted and cornered, but together, stronger than they had been alone. The chase had only begun, and he would face it, no matter the cost. The tunnel was cold and damp. Water dripped slowly from broken pipes above, echoing like the ticking of a clock. The man sat with his back against the wall, his arm around the trembling alien girl. Her breathing was uneven, and her soft ears twitched with every sound from outside. She was afraid, but she did not let go of him. Her small hands clung to his coat, as if he was the only solid thing in her world. He knew the patrol would not stop. They would search every ruin, every tunnel, every shadow. If they caught him with her, there would be no mercy. Not for her, not for him. The law was clear. Helping her kind was treason. Yet here he was, holding her close, protecting her with everything he had. The choice weighed heavy on his mind, but his heart had already decided. The girl lifted her head slowly, her glowing eyes meeting his. You should let me go, she whispered, her voice rough and broken. If they find me, you will die. Her words cut into him like a blade. Even now, she was trying to protect him, even if it meant sacrificing herself. He shook his head firmly, his voice steady. No, he said, I will not leave you. Her ears trembled, her eyes filled with disbelief. No one ever stayed, she whispered, almost too softly to hear. The man's jaw tightened, anger burning inside him. What kind of world had left her like this? Alone, abandoned, convinced she was worth nothing. He placed a hand gently on her shoulder. I am not no one, he said. I am here, and I will not leave. For a long moment she stared at him, silent tears slipping down her cheeks. Then she lowered her head, pressing her forehead against his chest again. Her body shook, but not from fear this time. It was from the weight of trust she was slowly allowing herself to feel. The man closed his eyes, his arm tightening around her. He knew what this meant. From this point on, there was no turning back. She was his to protect, his to guide, no matter the danger. After some time, he rose to his feet, pulling her gently with him. We cannot stay here, he said. She nodded weakly, her legs unsteady. He guided her deeper into the tunnel, where the shadows grew thicker. They walked slowly, their footsteps echoing. The air grew colder, but the darkness gave them cover. At the end of the tunnel, he found a half-collapsed passage leading upward. A way out, risky but possible. He stopped and crouched beside her. This is dangerous, he whispered. The patrols are above, but this may be our only chance. Her ears lowered, and she shook her head. Please, she whispered, don't risk yourself for me. Her words pierced him again, but he shook his head firmly, his voice steady and strong. If I walk away now, I will never forgive myself. The girl's eyes widened, shining in the dim light. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came. Instead, she reached out slowly, her trembling fingers brushing against his hand. It was the smallest touch, but it carried the weight of her choice too. She would follow him, even if she feared the outcome. Together, they began to climb. Broken stones scraped their hands, and dust fell into their faces. But step by step, they pushed upward toward the surface. At the top, the man peered out through the cracks. The city above was alive with danger, patrols sweeping the streets, their voices harsh and cruel. Searchlights cut through the ruins, hunting for shadows. He ducked back, his heart pounding. The girl clung to his arm, her body trembling. He could hear her silent plea again. Please keep me safe. And he answered it not with words, but with action. When the lights passed, he pulled her out into the night air. They crouched low, moving from shadow to shadow. Every sound, every movement made her ears twitch violently. But she stayed close to him, trusting his steps. The patrol's voices grew louder again, echoing across the empty streets. Spread out. Search every ruin, one shouted. The girl flinched, but the man's steady grip on her shoulder kept her moving. They slipped behind a fallen wall, hearts pounding. The man looked at her, his eyes steady. This is our choice, he whispered. Either we run, or we give up. She stared at him, her lips parting. I don't want to die, she whispered, her voice breaking. Then live, he said firmly. Live with me, and I will keep you safe. Her eyes filled with tears again, but this time she nodded. She pressed her small hand into his, her ears no longer trembling. It was the moment their bond became more than survival. It was trust, it was hope, it was the choice that tied their fates together. The man rose, pulling her with him. The night was dangerous, the patrols relentless. But he felt a strength inside him that he had not felt in years. He was no longer running for himself. He was running for her. And as they vanished into the dark edges of the city, He knew the choice he had made would change both their lives forever. There would be no turning back. But he would not turn back even if he could. Because she was no longer just a trembling girl in the firelight. She was the reason he fought, the reason he risked everything. And he would keep risking it all. For her. The night air was sharp and cold. The man and the girl moved carefully through the ruins, keeping low, always watching the shadows. The patrols still searched behind them, their voices echoing in the distance. But here, at the edge of the city, the sounds of boots grew faint. The ruins opened into the outer fields, broken land under a wide sky. The girl's steps slowed, her body weak from hunger and fear. She clung to his arm, her soft ears drooping with exhaustion. Yet her glowing eyes still searched his face, as if to ask if they were truly safe. He looked back at her and gave a small nod. Almost, he whispered, his voice steady. Her ears twitched softly, catching the word. For the first time, she let herself believe it. They crossed the last crumbling wall and stepped into the open night. The stars stretched above them, bright and endless. The girl stopped, staring up with wide eyes. Her lips parted as if she had forgotten such beauty even existed. Her ears lifted slowly, no longer trembling. She whispered one word, full of awe. Free. The man watched her, feeling the weight in his chest lighten. She had lived so long in fear, in darkness, unwanted and abandoned. Now, for the first time, she was standing under open skies. But he knew this was not the end. The patrols would not stop. The world would not suddenly become kind. The danger was still out there, waiting. And that was why he had to decide. The girl turned to him, her glowing eyes shining with both relief and fear. Why? She asked softly, her voice rough but clear. Why did you save me? Her question hung heavy in the night. He looked at her fragile body, her scarred face, her trembling ears now still. And he answered simply, because no one else would. Her eyes filled with tears. She lowered her head, her voice breaking. No one ever cared. The man's hand moved gently to her shoulder, steady and firm. I care, he said. I will protect you. The words were not spoken lightly. They were a vow, a promise, stronger than the danger that hunted them. The girl's tears fell silently, shining in the starlight. She stepped closer, pressing her forehead against his chest. Her ears brushed against him, soft and warm. She whispered again, but this time the word carried hope, not fear. Safe. He wrapped his arms around her, holding her close. Yes, he said, his voice quiet but firm. You are safe with me. The wind moved across the open fields, carrying the smell of earth and dust. The city lay behind them, filled with patrols and cruelty. Ahead was only uncertainty, but also freedom. The man lifted his eyes to the horizon. He knew the road would not be easy. They would be hunted. They would be tested. But he also knew this. He had chosen her. And he would never let go of that choice. The girl leaned against him, her body weak but her spirit stronger than before. Her ears no longer trembled with fear. They rested calmly against him. Her glowing eyes looked at the stars one more time. Then she whispered, so soft it was almost lost in the wind. Will you stay? The man looked down at her, his voice steady. Always, he said. Her lips curved in the smallest smile, the first he had seen from her. It was fragile, but it was real. The night stretched on, and together they walked farther from the ruins. Every step carried them away from fear, and closer to something new. The girl no longer looked behind her, she only looked at him. Her trust was complete, her silent plea answered. He had promised, and she believed him. That belief gave him strength greater than any weapon. As the horizon grew pale with the first light of dawn, the man thought back to the firelight where it had begun. He remembered her trembling above the flames, afraid, starving, alone. He remembered the moment he reached for her, risking everything. That one choice had changed everything. Now, as dawn broke, she walked beside him, no longer trembling. She was alive, and she was his to protect. The girl looked up at him once more, her glowing eyes soft. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice steady this time. The man nodded, his heart heavy but strong. "You don't need to thank me," he said. "I gave you my promise." She lowered her head, but her ears lifted gently, peaceful at last. And together, under the rising sun, they walked into a future neither of them had expected. He had risked everything, and he would keep risking everything, because she was no longer just a trembling girl in the ruins. She was hope, she was trust, she was his promise, and he would never break it.